I was standing in the corner of my parents' living room with a glass of sparkling cider going warm in my hand when my mother decided to make me the entertainment. The annual family holiday party was in full swing. Too many people, too much perfume, too much judgment packed into one expensive house. My parents loved hosting these events because they gave them an audience, and my mother loved an audience almost as much as she loved humiliating me in front of one. "Emily, come here," she called, her smile already sharp enough to draw blood. She was standing beside the piano with Aunt Sarah, Uncle Robert, my brother David, and a cluster of cousins who only remembered I existed when there was a chance to look down on me. "Tell everyone about your new job." I had been dreading that sentence since I walked through the front door. "I work at Metropolitan Hospital," I said. My mother laughed softly. "She's being modest. She answers phones at the hospital, barely makes minimum wage, but we're proud she's finally employed after all that schooling." That got the exact reaction she wanted. Pity, smirks, that awful sympathetic nod people use when they want credit for kindness they do not actually feel. Aunt Sarah patted my arm. "At least it's honest work, dear." David appeared at exactly the right moment, like he had been waiting for his cue. He had that polished, smug look he wore whenever he was around family. Fresh off another real estate deal, expensive watch on his wrist, confidence spilling out of him like cologne. "Still working the front desk?" he asked, clapping my shoulder. "Someone's got to do the grunt work, right?" "I don't actually work at the front desk," I started. My mother talked right over me. "We just tell people she's in healthcare. It sounds better than receptionist." A few people chuckled. I took a slow sip of warm cider and said nothing. I had learned a long time ago that correcting them only made it worse. I had tried, in the beginning, to explain my rotations, my residency, my fellowship, my research, the surgeries, the responsibility, but none of it ever landed. If it could not be reduced to a version of success they had already approved, they ignored it. So eventually, I stopped fighting for accurate language from people who were committed to misunderstanding me. Uncle Robert swirled his drink. "Remember when she said she wanted to be a brain surgeon?" Aunt Sarah sighed. "Children have such wild dreams." Jennifer, one of my cousins, gave me that smile people wear when they want to look compassionate while being cruel. "It must be hard, Emily, watching everyone else succeed." My brother laughed. "How much do hospital receptionists even make? 30 grand, maybe?" "Less, probably," someone said. Dad joined the circle, folding his arms. "We offered her a better position at the family company, front office, stable pay, but she insisted on this hospital thing." "I like medicine," I said quietly. My mother corrected me instantly. "Answering phones isn't medicine." That was when the pager in my purse vibrated. I ignored it. Then it vibrated again, harder this time, insistent enough to punch through the noise in the room. I slipped it out just enough to glance at the screen. "Code Black, presidential trauma, chief of neurosurgery required immediately." For 1 second, everything inside me went cold. Code Black was reserved for emergencies so sensitive they triggered federal security protocols, and cerebral aneurysm rupture meant exactly one thing: someone important was dying fast. I checked the next line. No other surgeons qualified. I looked at the time. I had maybe 20 minutes before irreversible damage. "Emily, are you even listening?" my mother snapped. "We're talking about your future." I was already reaching for my phone. "I need to make a call." David rolled his eyes. There it is. No focus, no ambition, just taking phone calls in the middle of a conversation. I stepped away from the group and called the direct surgical line. "Chin," I said the second it connected. "Status." "Chief," Dr. Patel said, voice tight with panic. "We have the President's Chief of Staff incoming. Ruptured cerebral aneurysm. Secret Service is en route now. Dr. Morrison tried to scrub in, but he's not cleared for this level. Prep or 1. Full CT the second he arrives. Intubate immediately. Call Dr. Martinez. She's cleared. I was already moving toward the coat rack. Nobody touches him until I get there." "Yes, Chief." I ended the call and turned back. My family was staring at me now, confused, but still not understanding. "I have to go to the hospital," I said. My mother sighed dramatically. See? This is what I mean. They call her in on a holiday because she's just a receptionist. They don't respect her time. My phone rang again. Metropolitan Hospital Executive Director. I answered. Dr. Chin. Thank God, Harrison said. I know you're at a family event, but ruptured aneurysm, Chief of Staff, presidential emergency. I know. I grabbed my coat. Lockdown or one. Activate security protocol. Verify my clearance with Secret Service. Already in motion. Good. I'll be there in 14 minutes. I hung up. The room had gone quiet. My mother frowned. Who were you talking to? Before I could answer, my phone rang again. Unknown number. One I recognized anyway. I answered immediately. Dr. Chin speaking. Chief Chin, this is Special Agent Morrison with the Secret Service. We need confirmation that you are en route and will be performing the procedure. Confirmed. Do not move the patient before I arrive. I want a full security sweep of OR1 completed. Understood, Chief. Your clearance has been verified. I ended the call and looked up. My entire family had frozen. Even David had stopped smiling. Aunt Sarah spoke first, carefully. Why did he call you Chief? I have to go, I said, pulling on my coat. Chief of what? Jennifer asked. I paused at the door. For 6 years I had let them shrink me. Not because they were right, because I got tired of handing people the truth and watching them throw it away. But someone was dying, and I did not have time to unpack my entire life for people who had never once bothered to ask a real question. Exactly what you think, I said. I work at the hospital. Then I walked out. The drive took 11 minutes because the route had already been cleared. A Secret Service agent met me in executive parking, scanned my credentials, and escorted me through a secure side entrance straight to the surgical floor. By the time I reached the prep area, my team was ready. Dr. Martinez was already scrubbed in. Dr. Patel pulled up the scans. The rupture was severe. Anterior communicating artery aneurysm. Massive hemorrhage. The kind of case where every minute mattered and every mistake was permanent. I scrubbed in while issuing orders. Immediate craniotomy. Neuro monitoring live the entire case. I want anesthesia stable and vasospasm watched closely. The second anything changes, I hear it. The operating room doors opened and the rest of the world disappeared. That was always the strange mercy of surgery. Outside the room, people could misunderstand me, underestimate me, talk over me, flatten me into whatever version of myself they found convenient. But inside an operating room, truth had edges. Either you knew what you were doing or you didn't. Either your hands were steady enough or they weren't. Either your judgment could save a life or it couldn't. The brain did not care about family politics. It only cared whether I was good enough. And I was. The procedure took 5.5 hours. 5.5 hours of microscopic precision, controlled pressure, blood and suction and silence. 5.5 hours of chasing a window that kept narrowing. 3 hours in, I finally isolated the aneurysm. Clip. The titanium clip settled into my hand with familiar weight. I positioned it, adjusted it a fraction, checked the surrounding vessels again. Flow? Normal, Patel said. No changes in brain activity. Good. Let's close. 90 minutes later, I stepped back from the table. That's it. Neuro ICU. Continuous monitoring. Updates every 2 hours. My team moved quickly. I stripped off my gloves and gown and only then felt the exhaustion hit. Outside the OR, Director Harrison was waiting with a senior government official in an immaculate suit. Dr. Chin, Harrison said, this is Deputy Chief of Staff Richardson. We shook hands. Your colleague came through surgery successfully, I said. The next 48 hours matter, but I'm optimistic. He let out a breath he had probably been holding all night. The president asked me to thank you personally. I nodded, too tired for ceremony. Then he added, your record speaks for itself. Youngest chief of neurosurgery in the hospital's history. Over 300 successful brain surgeries. Published in 7 major journals. We were told you were the only surgeon in the city qualified for this. Tonight, I said. That happened to be true. It was nearly 3 in the morning by the time I got home. My phone had been vibrating for hours. I finally looked at it in the elevator. 43 missed calls, 67 messages. Mom, Dad, David, Aunt Sarah, cousins who had barely spoken to me in years. I opened the texts one by one. Emily, call me immediately. Why is CNN showing your picture? Is there another Dr. Emily Chin? It says you're chief of neurosurgery. That can't be you, right? I turned on the television, and there I was. A conference photo from the year before. Professional, composed, very much not standing beside a piano being described as a receptionist. The anchor was saying my name, my title, my hospital, my training, my research. Chief of Neurosurgery, one of the country's top cerebrovascular surgeons. My phone rang again. Mom. I answered. Her voice sounded nothing like it had earlier. No smugness, no edge, just confusion so complete it was almost childlike. Emily, the news is saying you're a brain surgeon. I am. And chief of surgery? Neurosurgery, I corrected. Yes. A long silence. Then, why would you let us think you were a receptionist? I sat down on the couch and stared at the dark city outside my window. I didn't let you think that, I said quietly. You told people I was a receptionist. I stopped correcting you. But if you're a surgeon, why didn't you tell us? I actually laughed at that, not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Do you remember when I told you I'd been appointed chief 6 years ago? Silence. You said it sounded like a fancy title for a regular doctor. You said David's real estate deal that week was more impressive. You told me I should focus on getting married instead of chasing career titles. Emily! Every time I mentioned a surgery, you changed the subject. Every time I talked about research, you dismissed it. So eventually I stopped offering pieces of myself to people determined not to value them. She was breathing unevenly now. You asked tonight how much hospital receptionists make, I continued. I make $470,000 a year, not counting research stipends. I paid off my loans years ago. I own my home. I run a department. I save lives. And none of that mattered to any of you because you had already decided who I was. We love you, she whispered. You loved a version of me that made David look brighter by comparison. That's not fair. Maybe not, I said, but it's true. Then I told her I was exhausted, that I had just spent 5.5 hours operating on a man who would have died without me, and that I was going to sleep. I hung up while she was still trying to find the right words. The next morning, my doorman buzzed up. Dr. Chin, you have visitors. The press? No, ma'am, your family. Of course. I let them up. A few minutes later, my living room filled with the same people who had stood around me the night before and measured my worth by the story they preferred. Only this time, they were quiet. They looked around my condo at the framed diplomas, the surgical commendations, the journals, the books, the life I had built without their approval. My mother started to speak, but I raised a hand. Before anyone says anything, I want to be clear, I said. I did not hide my career from you. You ignored it. Nobody interrupted. For 6 years, none of you asked what I actually did. You assumed, and those assumptions were cruel because they weren't just wrong. They revealed what you thought would make me respectable and what you thought would make me embarrassing. David rubbed a hand over his face. He looked wrecked. I'm sorry. I met his eyes. Were you sorry last night when you said my life was embarrassing? He flinched. My father stepped forward. We're proud of you. I shook my head. I didn't need you to be proud of me after the news told you I was impressive. I needed you to respect me when you thought I worked a desk job. That was the test, and all of you failed it. That landed. You could feel it. My aunt looked down. Jennifer looked like she wanted to disappear. My mother started crying, quietly at first. We should have listened, she said. We should have asked. We should have been better. That was the first honest thing I had heard from her in years. I took a breath and let some of my anger go, not because they had earned immediate forgiveness, but because I was too tired to keep carrying every sharp piece of it. I have to go back to the hospital, I said. I have a patient in neuro ICU, and I have rounds. I'm willing to have a real conversation later. A real one. But only if everyone in this room is ready to be honest. They all nodded. As I opened the door, I turned back once. The next time someone tells you what they do for a living, I said, believe them and respect them even if their title doesn't impress you. One by one, they filed out. Apologies, awkward hugs, promises to do better. When the door finally closed behind them, my apartment went quiet. A text came in from Dr. Martinez. Patient is awake, full neurological function intact. You did it. I smiled despite myself and typed back, we did it. Then I grabbed my keys and headed back to the hospital. 6 months later, at the family reunion, my mother introduced me differently. This is our daughter, Dr. Emily Chin, Chief of Neurosurgery at Metropolitan Hospital. Not with performance, not with that glittering, cutting smile, just the truth. For the first time when I spoke, my family listened. Afterward, my youngest cousin, all wide eyes and certainty, came up and asked, Aunt Emily, can I be a brain surgeon like you? I knelt down, so we were eye level. You can be anything you want, I told her. And when you become it, don't let anyone make you feel small, not even family. She nodded like I had handed her something precious. Across the room, my mother looked at me, and this time her smile was real. It wasn't perfect. We still had years of damage to unlearn, but it was a start. And sometimes a start is enough.